What would the world look like if people felt like they mattered? Welcome to the Lead with Love podcast, exploring what it means to lead with love in business and life. I'm your host, Jada Selner, and in this show, I'll share meaningful conversations to help you, the creative, the entrepreneur, the world changer, reach more people, go after your dreams, and serve your community with love. I appreciate you joining me. Now let's get cozy and start today's episode. As entrepreneurs, we can get all consumed with our work. I would even use the word obsessed. So how do you make sure work doesn't fill up your entire life so that you don't miss out on connecting with the people who matter the most to you? And I truly believe that a business that compromises your health and your relationships is not a sustainable business model. In today's Lead with Love podcast, we dive into a very simple solution that will deepen your connection and presence with your family. And even if you don't have children, you can do this with your partner as well. In today's conversation, I get cozy with Jim Sheils, the author of the Amazon bestseller, The Family Board Meeting. We'll break down the simple steps on how to create this in your own family rhythm. And Jim was really motivated by what he saw as one of the most tragic challenges of modern life: the disconnection of busy entrepreneurs from their families. So Jim developed the family board meeting process to help business owners bridge the gaps between themselves and their loved ones. Now, Jim's message has spread around the globe, often called crazy glue for families. His popular and simple frameworks now reach thousands of parents worldwide, helping them feel more connected with their kids, be happier at home, and leave a lasting legacy. Jim is the founder of 18 Summers, which we'll talk about the reason behind that name in this episode. And with 18 Summers, he specializes in live events, workshops, and private consulting for organizations looking to strengthen their family lives while still succeeding in business. He's an in-demand public speaker and owns a private real estate company that has done more than $200 million in transactions. Now let's get cozy with Jim. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Jada. How you doing?
I'm good. What part of the world are you in right now? Are you in Florida?
I am in St. Augustine, Florida.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm in California, and I thought that there would be some spring weather and sunshine, but we've kind of been going back and forth with like some gray, gloomy days, which is very rare for California.
Yeah, we're 85 and sunny in Florida, so we're kind of typical today.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I remember, I believe the first time that I stumbled upon your work was actually at Giovanni's, one of his Archangel events in Long Beach, California. And I remember at that event hopping on the stage with Tone Loc to Funky Cold Medina.
I remember that.
Yes, I feel like Gio knows how to throw some epic dance parties. But in that, I got to learn about the family board meetings, the book, and just the process of how you create more meaningful connections between especially busy entrepreneurs to connect with their children, which I'm excited to dive deeper into. But I just remember that's how, I first stumbled upon your work, and I've been really, really inspired by it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, ditto. I'm looking forward to catching up because we have spoken a lot in the past, but it's definitely been probably a year.
Yeah, I'm trying to, because I think it was maybe Jason Gaynard's Mastermind Talks in Carmel. Could that be 2 years or one?
Well, you know what? Yeah, that would be 2 years.
Yeah.
Because, wow, time flies.
I know. I feel like as the kids get older too, like it felt a lot slower when my daughter's little. She's almost 12 now, but I don't know. It feels like it's speeding up where I'm like, like how old are your children right now?
I'm on the range going from 2 to 15. So we're all over the boards.
I love it. And so the first question that I'd love to start asking you is, what does leading with love mean to you? And how do you put love into practice in your business?
Wow, big questions. For me, I'd say leading with love would have to be leading with your values. And I try to make decisions, value-based decision-making was taught to me. And I think what supports love, it's patience, it's presence, it's kindness, it's humility. So I try to put those values into practice because I think love has a bunch of different meanings for me.
Yeah.
And I am constantly, I try to hold the spaghetti strainer. That's what I talk to the kids about when I teach kids. Like, I have a giant spaghetti strainer, and that's my values. And I think love would encompass a bunch of those that I just named. And I try to make my decisions with where I'm going to be going on vacation, what next venture I'm going to be going into, and things I'm doing with my family by that. So I try to use that spaghetti strainer, and that's how I kind of put it into practice. And in my business, I ask people, I don't know if you've ever done this, Jada, but I was told, go to some of your biggest clients and ask them, why did they work with you? Why did they sign up to work with you? You know, the Giovannis, who I've gotten to have him and his son to us, and different people. And what they said is you have an incredible ability to build trust quickly with people in their families. So I try to lead with that. I try to lead with love by saying, if I can be trustworthy, then I can do a better job working with families, running my investment business. And so far it's worked pretty good. So putting it into practice, that was my big feedback from clients, was you have a great ability to build trust at a quick pace. And so I always try to honor that and never abuse that, and put that into practice, both with my family and with my coworkers. And I think with my coworkers, I've kind of been known like, oh, you're the family guy. One thing I'm very proud of, I could be interviewed behind my back by anyone who's closely worked with me, whether it's in my family business or in investments I've done. And I like to give to the people that work around me the same thing I try to give to myself, which is I really do put a priority on taking care of yourself and making time for your family. And I figure, again, sharing that value forward, I really insist. Like right now, my CFO is going in for surgery. And I said, will you just stop? Don't do anything. You need to be there with your family, hang out. So I try to share that value and kind of prioritize it for the people I work with as well. So that's, I guess, how I would say I lead with love.
Yeah, I really love that question to ask, some of your best clients of why they signed up with you, because I love, I believe we have a mutual friend, Clay Hebert, and he always talks about you can't read the label from inside the jar. So sometimes it's very helpful to see, because sometimes we just live our values, organically, authentically, and it's great to get that reflection back of how people see it in motion. And I'm curious, especially the family piece of putting family first, was there ever a time where that value was violated in your life or in your work, where someone didn't really support that value that is so important to you?
Yeah, it's funny. I just did a family call a couple of days ago, me, my wife, Jamie, and it was about 5 families from our 18 Summers tribe on there. And we were talking about value-based decision-making. And years ago, I've always done the family consulting and the retreats and the way that we met and wrote in the books, but I also have done a lot in the investment side of the game in real estate. I had a money partner that didn't share my values, was out on the West Coast. I used to have to go to Vegas all the time, which isn't really my scene. I have nothing against it, but I'm more of a simple fella. But it started to become a habit I could see with my wife, where he was, right before we'd go on a vacation, he'd call and raise some sort of trouble. Oh, we're not going to fund this. We're not going to do that. And it got to be at first a joke and then a not so funny joke, where my wife would patiently say, he can't go on vacation with us again. He can't be here for this weekend thing again. And I don't know if it was being done consciously or unconsciously, but I had to step back, Jada, and look and say, okay, a big value of mine is sobriety. A big value of mine is honesty, simplicity, the outdoors. And I don't like to bring my phone with me when I'm in the outdoors, and I was having to do that. So years ago, pretty scary situation for me, but all these values had to be paid attention to. And I walked away from a very, very, very big money source for funding. And that could have been detrimental to my business. But what I saw was, financial abundance and entrepreneurship are values of mine, but so many other of my values were being violated. I had to walk away from this partnership. I'm not saying anything against them as a person, but our values didn't match. And I had to, that old thing, oh, can you choose, something over money? The way I saw it is it was affecting my family life on some of my most sacred times, weekends, vacations, dates with my wife. And I said, that is not most important. It is important to be able to provide for my family, but I need to walk away. And I did. And you kind of take those 3 levels down, Jada, and then you start to, pull the nose of the plane back up. And that's what happened. But it was really hard. But I had to draw a line in the sand and say my family has to come first, and too many of my values are being violated.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think sometimes it's the recurrences that happen over and over again until you realize of like, why am I not feeling good? Why is my energy depleted? And just being able to pay attention to those signs when something doesn't feel good, and just being able to, make that brave decision, because there's also, I'm sure you have a value of wanting to take care of and provide for your family too. So it's like being able to figure out which of those priorities in which order are the most important to make those type of decisions.
Yeah, and we might as well be real vulnerable here. So our good friend Clay Abarum, I get together with a group of guys every couple of months. Really nice sounding board, and Clay's one of them. And I'll give Clay a big shout out as I've been going through my own family improvements, my own family deepening. And it's been a beautiful ride, but there's some real tender moments. I found with me, Jada, for those values, there were 2 values that I kept saying, I'm going to provide and protect. I'm going to provide and protect. And I remember talking with Clay and saying, yeah, providing and protecting is important, but sometimes you just got to love your family. And, we came through an interesting story of how our family came together, and I remember Clay said, Jim, you've done such a good job. I think you've created a space where you can just love them. And, providing and protecting is important, but you're at an 8, you can probably go down to about a 5 or a 4. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs need to hear that, because we wear that badge of honor of provide, protect, provide, protect. Sometimes it's time to put love in the first position, and you can dial those 2 values down just a bit. I needed to anyway.
Yeah, I completely understand that. So one of the things that I love so much about you is you created the family board meeting. And I know for many entrepreneurs, we can become really consumed with our work. And it's, I feel like you've created this beautiful practice and ritual on how to make sure your work doesn't fill up your entire life with a never ending to-do list and not actually connecting with your loved ones, with your family. So I would love for you to just share, what is a family board meeting? How do they work? And where did the inspiration come to start this?
Yeah, good question. So the family board meeting is a simple rhythm that I created years ago, really to get to know I have 4 children, and my 2 oldest sons are adopted. So I'm very lucky. I get to be a father on the side of both biological and adoptive. And it's such a beautiful ride on both sides. And I can look as a person on both sides, there's no difference. When you go all in and love a child, there's just no difference. But whether they're biological or adoptive, it takes some real focus and priority to get to know them, to nurture them, to love them. And when these 2 little boys came into my life at the age of 7 and 5, I wanted to make sure I got to know them. I was a busy entrepreneur who was driven and can sometimes get caught up in his work. So I actually, first Christmas we were together, gave them these things called quality time coupons. My wife and I made them. And I said, look, you are not very clear on my crazy world of entrepreneurship, but I'm an entrepreneur. But you are my most important investors and clients in my life by far. So I want to make sure that I spend time with you and get to know you and have fun together. So these are quality time coupons. You can cash one in every 90 days for a day, just of your own. You get to pick it. You get to create it. We're going to live it. My phone's going off. And these quality time coupons turned into this rhythm, this strategy that people would hear about and say, tell me what you do with your sons. And I would explain it. And then it got put into a simple framework, and it kind of went viral, I guess you could say, John. I mean, all these people writing to me, I'm saying, wow, I didn't even know that person knew I existed, let alone used it with their family. And the strategy is simple. Every 90 days, I have, quote unquote, a board meeting, an important meeting with each of my children. It's one-on-one, without electronics, and a fun activity of their choice with focused reflection, which means time to talk at the end. And these simple strategies become the pillar in our relationship. It's been the pilings that hold it steadfast. And getting to know my sons, when I first came into my son's life, you haven't met my wife yet, but I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I really feel like I found who I was supposed to find, and we fell in love instantly. But she had full custody over these two young sons. Her first marriage had been a very disastrous situation, marrying a high school boyfriend, after college, and, addiction, abuse. She stood up for herself, got out of it, got full custody, and met me a few years later. And these two little boys were yearning for a male role model. And I was so lucky to step in. But when I did, there were trust issues, and rightfully so, especially for my oldest son, Alden. And when I first came into his life, Jada, he was close to failing, a terrible student. He was put on the spectrum for autism at school, and I can't stand that word, spectrum. And then he was also suffering every night from night terrors. And if you don't know what those are, you're very lucky, because it's when your child wakes up in a half-conscious state screaming. It can take hours to get them back to bed. Call me a naive optimist, but I knew these things could change. And I knew it wasn't necessarily medication and therapy that I needed. Now, those are important things in some cases, but not in all cases. And I think he just wanted to feel loved and appreciated and safe. And Jada, within 1 year of giving out these quality time coupons, starting this family board meeting strategy where every quarter I had a day just one-on-one with him, no phone, doing something his choice and having time to talk. Within 1 year, he went from failing the third grade to getting the most improved student of the third grade, and he was beaming when he got the little award at the end of the year. The diagnosis of autism was retracted.
Wow.
They admitted it to be a mistake, and that's very rare. And probably most important to me was within a year, his night terrors were gone. And when you get results like that, I can talk about it now, but you probably saw me years back in the day. I'd break down and start crying in front of 500 people on stage telling the story.
Yeah.
Because it meant so much to me to see these results and to know that is not something I could have delegated as a new adoptive father. I couldn't have. And why would I want to? What honor, what reward to see this and to know I was a part of creating this space and being there. And that's what this does. And the fun we had together. It wasn't a painful shock therapy process. So this one simple strategy, from notes I've gotten and letters and videos, it has helped divorced dads reconnect with their kids and make up for lost time. It's helped rekindle flatline relationships in families that it's not bad, but it's just void. And that's what the family board meeting strategy is all about. It's a simple rhythm to consistently have true quality time with each of your kids on an ongoing basis.
I love that. And I've definitely implemented it with my own daughter. And one of the things that I'd ask, every time I would ask, what would she want to do? And we created this ritual of milk and bookies where we would have milk and cookies and read a book side by side. No matter if we went out and did an activity outside of the house, we would always come back and kind of end on the couch with some cookies. And that's just kind of one of those things that were repeated over and over again. Could you tell me about the very first board meeting and what was the agenda? Because it sounds like your son was 7 at that time.
Yeah, he was 7. Wow. Yeah. So we went to St. Augustine Beach to boogie board together and build sandcastles. And then we went to one of his favorite little cafes or restaurants. And then we drove all the way up, which was, a good 35-minute drive to, and this is pretty interesting, a Montessori school that he was going to go back into because he wanted me to be able to observe the classroom with him. He designed this whole day. And when you talk about focused reflection, for some people, the whole thing of what we try to do is get one-on-one with them, let them have a fun activity, decompress, open up, and then have a conversation at the end. And I always start with, what was your favorite part of the day and why? At least that's how we started. Now it's more open conversation. And he said, I don't know, going in the water together. What about you? And I said, you know what? I'm just so honored that you are having me step in to be your dad. And I want to get to know you. I want to have fun with you. I don't want this time to pass by. And watching you laugh in the water, that's what was my favorite part of the day. And that's all that was said that one day. I think also, Jada, I said, please know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. I'm here for good. And for a child, for the stuff we probably won't have time to go into today, to go through what my son went through and my wife, that is like putting spinach in Popeye soup. And I watched him right from that day start to drop all those other things that I mentioned to you before. But that was the first one with him.
Thank you for sharing that. And I know you have a private Facebook group. I believe it's called 18 Summers.
18 Summers, yes.
Yes. Tell me, one, why 18 Summers? And then I want to reference a specific post that really touched my heart that I'd love to go into.
Sure. So a mentor of mine a few years ago, Jad, I was doing these talks, right? I was already starting to do family talks. Incredible guy. His name's Joel, speaking coach. And I'm talking to him about him. He said, Jim, you're onto something. And listen to me and listen to nothing else today if you want. But just remember this, you're doing it right. And you only got 18 summers. And my ears peaked up. And he said, now listen, just hear me through. My daughters are still my daughters, but I'm telling you, it's different. Grab those first 18 summers. It's the most important thing I ever did, because within those first 18 years is when you have the most time to really connect, to have fun, to teach them important lessons before they go out into the real world on their own. You got 18 summers. And for me, when I heard that, it hit me like a ton of bricks, because my son's at 7 and 5. So I went, oh my gosh, do the math. Hold on, I only got 11 summers left. And some people say, oh, that's not true. They're your kids after this, they're after that. I believe it wasn't Daniel Pink. It was another famous author who was talking about maintaining and building relationships, that the average parent will have spent 85% of all time they ever will with their kids by the time the end of their 18th summer. So when you only have 15% of time on average left. Now, I think you can grow that when you're a conscious parent, but that struck me. And I thought, the years are not all created equal. That was actually a friend of mine, David Bach, who's a big financial empowerment writer and has actually been to our retreats with his sons. He said, Jim, the years are not all created equal. Enjoy some of that stuff you push off from retirement now. And I take that in with my family. I don't want to wait for that big trip where someone years down the road is sick or this or that. So I try to grab those 18 summers. And I have some Canadian friends that say, well, we love winters. So we say we have 18 winters. I said, that's fine, as long as you're doing the math and it's putting a positive motivation on you to know that the years are not all created equal. And if you take hold of this time now, you're going to build a deeper relationship. You're going to be more present. You're going to have more focus on the time right now. And then by the time they're adults, they're going to want to hang out with you. They're going to be better prepared for the practical affairs of life. And you're probably going to be able to stretch that average 15% of time left to 20, 25, maybe 30, which feels good for me. And that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. And inside your 18 Summers Facebook group, you posted a story about one of the board meetings that had to deal with pizza. And I would love for you to tell me about this first board meeting, because I think it's become something that you've repeated over time now.
Yeah, that's so funny. That one is really gets a lot of views, and it was something, I'm sure, Jada, I've seen some of your stuff. You just shoot it like straight from the hip, like this happened. I just got to talk about it now. It's not going to be pretty. I'm just going to share it.
Yeah.
And that's what this one was. And what happened was, again, once a quarter, I'm having this important meeting, quote unquote, a board meeting with each of my kids. And what we've tried to do for the final board meeting of the year is make it a service theme. Because, it's the holidays. And I said, look, we're having fun all year. What if you guys choose the activity, but let's put it to something of service, of helping others. We've done anything from, walking the dogs at the no-kill shelter to putting packages together for troops overseas. And then we came up with this one of Pizza Friday, where my son had done stuff with feeding the homeless for this Dining with Dignity. And we always have our traditions at our house to help simplify them. Pizza Friday is Pizza Friday. And it's not as cool as it used to be because I'm a nerdy gluten-free guy now for the most part, but it's Pizza Friday. And my oldest son said, hey, Dad, let's do Pizza Friday for the homeless. And I was like, buddy, that's a great idea. So we went down into downtown St. Augustine. I go into the pizzeria that's right near the downtown square, and I think I order like 10 pizzas. And we order the pizzas, we get out, and we go around the green to see if there's usually a good amount of homeless population there. And we get to a guy who is sitting right in the middle of the thing. Oh, actually, let me change this. We got 5 pizzas to start. And we went, and there was a guy standing there, and he was talking to people, and I kind of called him the captain because he seemed to be the captain of all the homeless people around. We walked up to him, and he looked at us like, why are they walking up to me in this pizza? And we said, hey, man, how you doing? He's like, okay. We said, yeah, it's the holidays, and we just want to wish you a Merry Christmas and give you these pizzas. And he stared at us. I remember he looked at us, and we handed them to him. And he said, okay, thank you. And we start to walk away. And we had been told by different people and stigmas that, oh, they're just going to, trade it for booze or whatever and be selfish. And we thought he'd hoard it because he was a big guy. And he started to pass it out to all his friends. Like, hey, he was calling all these people in. And me and Alden watched this, like, just, here's a guy with nothing. He started giving it all out. And I just said, Alden, we got to go get more pizzas. He's like, yeah. So we go in and we order like an obnoxious amount of pizzas. Then I think it was like 10 more pizzas. And there's people behind the counter like, what are you doing? We go back and we have this stack. And again, this has been a few years, so I'm trying to remember the exact story. We go up onto this gazebo right in the middle of the downtown. And we say, hey, Captain. And he's like, wow, you're back. And we said, yeah, we watched you. We watched you. We gave you those pizzas, and you only barely kept any for yourself. You gave it out to everyone else around you, and that makes you a pretty good friend. And we wanted to give you more. So this guy just starts bawling. And he's like, why are you doing this? And we said, we told you, you're a good friend, and you deserve to have this. So we give him the pizzas, and now he's, again, kind of captain passing them out around. And Alden and I go back to the car, and like, we're pretty nostalgic. It's the holidays, it's excited. I'm like, I can't believe the lesson my son has just learned that I'm going to be able to talk to him about, how many different levels can we hit here? And my wife, I turn on my phone because we had already been doing other things before. I always have my phone. If I turn it off, I turn on my phone, and my wife calls a few minutes after I just turned it on. And I'm like, honey, you will not believe this one, incredible. And I forgot, we had said before we went to the homeless, we dropped off pizzas for the firemen and the police officers and all that kind of stuff. And she was like, how was it? How was Pizza Friday? It was good. And she said, honey, I just got to ask. And I'm like, what? She's like, did you remember to get pizzas for us? I was like, damn it. So classic entrepreneur guy. We go back and now the people are coming in. They're like, all right, what the hell's going on? You just ordered 17 pizzas. Now you're getting 2 more and a gluten-free and nerd. What do you want? And so we finally get ours and we go back, we wait for our pizzas. Me and Alden are feeling great. We're talking about, how we watch this guy with nothing give and support his friends. And then we were able to compliment him and say, you're a good friend, Captain. That's why we call you the Captain. Look at what you just did. You deserve to have some kindness. And we're driving back around this green in St. Augustine, and all of a sudden, Alden yells, Dad, look. And everywhere you look, because there was a lot of homeless people in this one section because they usually go to a shelter for the evening, is a homeless person eating a piece of pizza with a smile on their face. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was probably like 2 dozen, and just in different spots going down this one road where it's popular. And, I'll always have that moment with my son and teach those lessons. You can imagine, because I'm already like the guy that cries at the end of Old Yeller anyway. I'm just teary-eyed and trying to hold it back and then shedding a few tears and going, oh, that's why we do this. That's why we have this quality time. You created this day. You made it happen. What are the lessons we're taking home? And we've continued to do that. Every couple of months, we'll just go buy a bunch of pizzas and then just walk around, find a homeless person and hand it to them and say, hey, just thought you might want this. And they're extremely grateful. We've never had any I don't recommend this from everyone because I know people say, oh, there could be mental illness in that. And I understand safety, but I've never had that problem. And it's just become kind of a tradition of quote unquote Pizza Friday. That all started on, again, a board meeting with Alden where we just wanted to do something nice around the holidays for people.
And I love that you have created this process in a way that other people can implement it in their own families. And I know one of the big questions that comes up is like, well, how young can your kid be before you actually start your first board meeting? What's your answer to that?
2.5.
2.5.
Yeah, that's when I started my daughter, and she made it 3 hours. She did design the day. She made it 3 hours and then fell asleep, and I'm totally fine with that. Because I say a minimum of 4 hours, because everything we've learned, if you have a minimum of 4 hours together uninterrupted, that's when real opening the line of communications and decompression occurs. But 2.5, they have an idea of what they want to do. So Sammy is almost 2.5. So he's about to go on his first board meeting. So I'm like, so excited. Like, I can't wait. So, and at that age, you have to give him a little bit of an idea. But Maggie knew she wanted to go to story hour at the library, and they had a holiday arts and crafts because it was around the holidays when she did this first one. And she knew that she wanted to go get acai bowls. So it was pretty well figured out. And she didn't make it 4 hours. Again, she fell asleep right at 3 hours. But they know. And the funny thing with Maggie and other people that have told me starting around 2.5, she says, Daddy, when's our next meeting? Okay, we need to schedule our next meeting. I think we need to schedule a meeting. And they remember it because you're setting the stage for connection. It's so rare now, Jada, that we actually are completely focused. We let our kids plan the day. We're one-on-one without anyone else. Not our spouse, not siblings, not our other friends, not their other friends, but just one-on-one and without our phones. On my board meetings, what makes them successful, one of the main ingredients is I am completely and totally unavailable. No text can get through to me, no phone call, no email. Because once you take one text, one phone call, one email, it pulls you completely out of the moment. It pulls you into that dang work thing that's been frustrating you, and now you're working it out in your head, and your kid is sitting there waiting to give you the opportunity to connect, but it ruins it. So it's so important to have that complete and total unavailability. It's such a gift for you and your kids.
Yeah, and I know you can get Family Board Meetings, the book, on Amazon, it's been a best-selling book, but you basically walk people step by step on how to implement this in their family, right?
Super easy. Everyone, the biggest compliment I can get is people say this is so easy to understand and to apply. And the book is, again, a short book. You can read it from a flight from New York to Florida. And the steps are very clear. It's easy to buy into. It's easy to implement. And it's easy to see results from, which makes people wanting to do more. Speaking of, Jason Gaynard was one of the first people that put me on stage years ago. And now I have people from the Mastermind Talks community that's saying this has been their steady Eddie for, 7+ years now, which just, melts my heart. Like, if I can have a small part in helping an entrepreneur stay grounded with their kids, that's top shelf for me.
Yeah. And I know you also run your own business. You've been an entrepreneur. Can you tell me just a little bit of what your day-to-day, like, what do you do? Because I think it's important that we see that a family board meeting is being implemented by people who have really busy, full schedules.
Oh, yeah. So I've had a real estate investment company for 21 years. That's where I first started being able to speak and go back to wealth creation and personal development events. But I always talked about relationships, the importance of relationships, and going through different things of the adoption, donating a kidney to my father, lots of things that have happened to me in the last decade. I started to just have these side retreats for entrepreneur families because no one was doing this. No one was including the families. So now I run 2 businesses. I still have a real estate investment company that has been really good to us, but it's, again, a lot of work, a lot of effort. 10 years ago, I'm 21 years in, but 10 years ago in 2008, or 11 years ago now, we came close to bankruptcy by the skin of our teeth. It was a very awful time. And that's when you're trying to balance business troubles with staying grounded and connected at home. And it's not an easy process. We all go through those ups and downs as entrepreneurs. So now I run two businesses, and about 50-50, and then hopefully it's going to 80-20 because 18 Summers is really picking up traction. I'm getting invited to more talks, more workshops, the curriculum that we're designing for people like yourself that want to implement the important lessons but aren't sure how to do it, especially if they're homeschooling or unschooling. So a lot of my time is made running these two businesses, but I try to integrate family life as much as I possibly can while doing so. And it's not always easy. I'll be the last one to say, oh yeah, it's easy. It's not, but man, it's worthwhile.
What part would you say has been a struggle or most challenging when you say that it hasn't always been easy? Can you tell me a specific moment?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that entrepreneurial badge of honor that we're always available. We'll work 90 hours so we don't have to work in corporate America. And that sounds great, but honestly, it's nothing to be proud of now. You have to have periods of time of complete and total unavailability. It's the only way to truly be present. So two of the things that we really need is consistent presence and consistent patience. That I've gotten to teach retreats with Dr. Shafali. She's incredible, and she helped teach me that. And let me give you an example. I don't necessarily have one. Actually, I do. But a recent one for me, it was about a month ago. I came home. I was going to get about a half hour with our little daughter, Maggie, and then her and my wife were going to something. I don't remember what it was, but we were getting on the trampoline. The trampoline's huge at our house, Jada. We love trampolines. It's just so much fun. And I usually leave my phone in the car, so I can't even touch it when I get home. But I had it in my pocket. And I was literally about to get on the trampoline, and I get a text. And I mean, someone really messed up bad on a real estate deal that I was finalizing. Totally out of my control. Could have waited, but man, it was frustrating. It's like, how did this happen? Come on. Where do you think my head was for the next 20 minutes? I wasn't there on the trampoline with my daughter. I was thinking about that. So what? I'm not present with her. I was probably impatient with her. Okay, honey, hold on. We'll play in a minute. And we only had a half hour together. And I reflected back after that happened and said, I just had an incredible opportunity to connect with my daughter, and I gave priority to something that could have waited 2 hours, and I didn't need to answer right now. And that's kind of the theme. But the overall for me probably would be, and I talk about this on stage a lot, was about in 2011, so almost 10 years ago, someone forwarded me an article about Steve Jobs. And it was about his biographer, Isaacson. And this guy, Isaacson, was interviewed by Time magazine. And what this guy said was in Steve Jobs' final days, he used the opportunity for final interviews to explain to his wife and kids why he wasn't always there for them. And he was quoted as saying, I wanted my kids to know who I was. I wasn't always there for them. And I wanted to explain why and for them to understand. And this guy, Isaacson, I don't even know who he is, but he said, Steve, are you glad you had a family? Are you glad you had kids? And supposedly Steve Jobs fired right back, even though he's literally on his deathbed. He said, it's 10,000 times better than anything I've ever done. And for me, that just hit me. And at first, Jada, I was like, well, I tried to dismiss the lesson like we all do. Try to be better than the lesson. Like, well, Steve Jobs is a jerk. He had that reputation. And then I was able to think, well, yeah, okay, but what if the rug of health got pulled out from you right now? Right now. And tomorrow was the final day. Would you be trying to do some final interviews? Have you been treating your investors and your clients better than your family? And I made that decision that day, reading that article. I wouldn't do that. That's where a big push in this whole 18 Summers thing came from. And let me tell you, at that time, again, we're talking, 10 years ago now almost, that I read this article. I had pulled an investment company out of near bankruptcy. I had adopted my two sons, and we were growing the family, eventually having two more kids. And it was when I was preparing to donate a kidney to my father. So I think when you get hit on a point of critical, I think we all get that. I never thought I'd be having family talks or doing interviews like this, but I got hit by such critical mass at once that I just developed a stronger commitment and curiosity towards family life. And I gave up perfection that day too. I said, I'm not going to be perfect at this, but I'm going to really put some effort into it, because perfection is such a disconnect. It's not about being perfect. It's about bridging our imperfection. So my catalyst, I guess, Jada, would be that day that I read that article. And I knew Steve Jobs maybe was leaving a few clues. And I'm not knocking his entrepreneurial achievements. That'd be pretty silly of me. But I do appreciate that there was a vulnerable statement like that made, because it definitely changed my life.
Yeah. And I know one big decision you made as a family is to pursue the homeschooling, alternative education within your family. And curious what inspired you to start this, and what was that process like to make that transition as a family?
Yeah, well, we've always been involved in less traditional education. My wife ran both Waldorf and Montessori schools, and I always loved those philosophies where it was, instead of like when I was in school, it would be sit down, be quiet, and follow us. And Montessori and Waldorf say, no, follow the child. Let them go where they're going to go, and then guide them and let them go deep, and you're going to see some incredible learning. And so we always had that kind of alternative. But once we got to 11 and 12, I just, Seth Godin asked that question, what is school for? And for me, I've said it's to help uncover our kids' gifts and prepare them for the practical affairs of life. And I just didn't feel, especially that and for us, Montessori and Waldorf only went up to 6th grade, I just didn't feel normal junior high, normal high school, public or private, was actually preparing for the practical affairs of life. And unfortunately, the practical affairs of life, Jada, are, and I've interviewed over 1,000 entrepreneurs on this. Tell me about the toughest times in your life. And they kind of fit this theme of periods of rejection, of loss, of abuse, periods of mistakes, like mistakes they made in their life against their core values, periods in their lives of heavy transition, periods in their life of unknown, bad relationships like bad breakups, financial crises, and illness and death. These are kind of, unfortunately, the practical affairs of life. It doesn't mean life's not wonderful, but it means these are practical affairs. And I always asked, as this list came together, saying, did your education, did your schooling do anything to prepare you for these? And the answer was always no. And I looked at it, probably since I had to sign a sheet of paper at the Mayo Clinic saying, you're going to give a kidney to your dad, there's a chance you might die. And I had to look at that and say, are my kids ready if I died? And the answer was no. So what I tried to do is, what would it take for me to feel like they're going to be okay if I wasn't here? And so I got really serious of saying, how can I counteract these toughest times? How can I work towards, what helps support my greatest times? And I think you've seen what I boiled it down to into 3 simple buckets was the 3 things I think not taught in main school, but can help our kids. And if you learn them together, oh my gosh, the deepening of your relationship is just unbelievable. It's these 3 areas: personal development, relationship skills, and financial intelligence. If you give these 3 gifts of a stable learning, of a foundation in these 3 areas, I think you set your kids up for success, not only personally, but professionally. And none of us just want a kid who's a successful entrepreneur, but horrible relationships and uncomfortable in their own skin. But if you look to do these 3 things with your children, by the age of 9, they're ready to learn them. Individuality starts, by all stats, around the age of 9 or 10. I think that they will have such an unfair advantage over the rest of the world. Those 3 things: personal development, financial intelligence, and relationship skills. My kids know that I love learning. I want them to learn, but these are the meat and potatoes for them now. I say, go deep in these 3 subjects, and anything else you decide to pursue will be supported by these 3 subjects.
And I love this approach so much, because it's definitely not what we learn in school, and oftentimes not even from our own parents, right?
Yes.
And I love that you shared about kind of that age of individuality around 9 or 10, because, that was kind of when I was looking at, like homeschooling would be a really good opportunity right now, but my daughter wasn't ready to make that shift or transition until she was 11, and in the middle of 6th grade, we took her out. And I just think these 3 core pillars that you're introducing are so important. And also, it's something that I'm like, how would families introduce those elements? I know you've created something, the education matrix, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So how does someone start to impart that type of knowledge if they necessarily don't have it themselves yet?
Yes. Well, 2 things, and we wouldn't be able to go into that too much today, just because that's almost a whole 2 more podcasts.
Right.
But here it is. The first thing they need to do is parents need to stop worrying that they're not good enough to teach their kids. That's just not true. No one cares more than you, and you might not be perfect, but you're very dedicated. And you don't need a certificate to teach your own kids. Just get that out of your head that you're supposed to delegate it out to someone like a fancy institution or the government. You need to be involved, and if you are, I think you have the ability to do a good job. Not perfect, but again, a good job. And what I tell them to do is look at these pillars. Think of the toughest times you had in your life. Your kids are going to face those, and you can help them be better prepared to, or help avoid some of them. You don't want them to avoid all of them, because some of those tough times are what made you what you were. So I think the starting point is books. You just talked about milk and bookies. What we do in our home, Jada, is a deep dive, slow digest. Now, a deep dive, slow digest has been one of the best ways I've ever found to teach lessons to my kids. So here it is. Our two youngest do not partake, but right now, every 90 days, my wife and my two oldest sons and I have our own book club. And it's a book based in this matrix, something that's going to help my own personal development, relationship skills, or financial intelligence. What we do is we do a slow digest. We only read about a chapter or two a week. Right now, we're reading The Alchemist, which is probably my fourth time reading it, but I wanted my two sons to read it to get the lessons. So what we do is we read it really slow so that if they had to cram because everyone's busy, they can cram an extra chapter or maybe 2 chapters before we meet. And then we go to a dinner once a week, just us and our 2 older boys. And we talk fun stuff, and then we do a discussion on the book. I pull questions out to say, do you have an example when you saw omens in your life? Do you have an example of times that you weren't careful about your decisions and didn't, you weren't clear on whether you trusted someone before you leaped? Just things, if you've ever read The Alchemist. So, and what I've found is by doing this, deep dive, slow digest, 1 to 2 chapters a week, we discuss it slowly. And at the end, I make them each do a presentation just in front of our family of what are the main lessons you got out of this book, so that they're having to teach it back to us. This one simple process has been a game changer. I wish I had read one book, just one, like this with my parents. I think our relationship would have been different. I'd have been better prepared. I mean, I think back when I was 15, I didn't even know the words emotional and intelligence could go together. I didn't even have an awareness of the subject, let alone that it was possible to have emotional intelligence. And that would be my starting point. Start with the milk and bookies like you talked about. Get a book that actually supports these 3 pillars and read it really slowly and have a conversation. That alone can spark awareness. And I always say to my boys, Jada, I promise you, I will tell you bad jokes. I tell bad dad jokes, and I'm always going to do that. But one thing I promise you is I will not lie. I don't lie to you. The things that we will read in our sleep, deep dive, slow digest, or we also, and I don't want to stack too much on with people. Like we do a usually online course every 90 days as well. And those are our 2 things. And then we play a game once a month for financial intelligence. But again, you want to build up to that. But yeah. I tell them the books alone, I say, guys, I already told you, I tell bad jokes, but I don't lie to you. And they've tested this over the years. I said, you've met enough of my entrepreneur friends. You know about their tough times. What we're going to be reading and discussing will support you no matter if you decide to become the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. This will support you. And their bullshit detectors go off, Jada, and they're like, Dad's not lying. He's going to tell a bad joke. We know that, but he's not lying. So that's the starting point, and I'm happy to send you a picture of my education matrix. And I can send a book list too, but just start identifying these books. And even if you read 2 to 3 books a year, what a jumping point. Because remember, as long as you start young, you don't have to cram. You don't have to rush. You don't want to. If you go through a book slowly and discuss it, you're going to get way more than if you force your kid to read 10 books real quick and write a 1-page summary. I've proven that over the last 5 years. It's way more potent to do it the way that I'm talking about. But giving the awareness that, man, these subjects matter personally and professionally, and taking the time to just do one of these, and it's a small step, but the results can be huge.
I love that approach so much, just the slow digest, but also doing it collectively together because, I just started getting Zoe to read personal development books. She just read the 7 The 7 habits of highly effective
teens. Yep, we've done that.
But what I realize is it's almost like delegating it to her. But what I love that you do is you bring it together as a family activity where everyone is reading it together and having conversations and then presenting it. Because I've had her present, like she's created Google slides and presented on, women in African American history. But I love this idea of looking at it from personal development, financial literacy, and relationship skills, and start to look from that lens, I think is so important. Are you going to have access to the education matrix at some point in the near future?
We're talking about putting out a pilot program in the fall, because so many people, I think it was another Seth Godin thing. It was one of his students, the CD Baby guy, I forget his name, really cool guy. I've heard his interviews.
Oh, yeah, Derek Severs.
He says, don't start a business unless people are asking you to. Well, Jada, let me just say, the stuff you've done, I love, I respect, I watch, I cheer from the sidelines. You're calling me. People of our other entrepreneur circles are saying, when are you putting this out? When are you going to give more of this? When are you going to? So my wife and I are turning saying, okay, it's time to share it. And we do plan to share it. There's going to be some sort of pilot in the fall. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but we want to keep it simple and effective like everything we try to do.
So where should people stay in touch with you, follow along to see when that is revealed? And I definitely think they should join your Facebook group because you share a lot of inspiring in real time stories too, which has been super helpful for me to binge on. I'm like, ooh.
Well, I would join our Facebook thing at 18 Summers. It's free, and it's just a good group of entrepreneur families wanting to deepen their relationships and also have some involvement in making sure their kids get the important lessons. And then the book is a really great starting point to see the principles that we're built on, our values, and how you can really put something into work to see results today for your family. After your first board meeting, I know, Jada, it's different. You've now put some powerful relationship principles to work, and it can just balloon out to the rest of your family and relationships. So, the Amazon book is like $10. It's a pretty easy investment, but I would encourage that. But the best way is 18summers.com or our family page. We do a lot of talks, retreats, and private workshops and work with different entrepreneurial groups. So happy to talk about that as well.
Yeah. And before we wrap up, I'd love to know just like, what is that next vision that you're moving towards? Because I know you're an entrepreneur, you're a visionary, and you're constantly building and creating and looking for ways to help and serve more people. What is that something that you're moving towards right now?
What we're moving towards is there has to be a go-to group for family connection for entrepreneurs. And I just want to try to harness all the people doing good in our space and help organize and get it out there. I don't see anyone else in the family space as competition. I see us as cooperation because it's such a huge market and such a need. So what I'm trying to do is organize the efforts of not only us, but others to say, okay, entrepreneur family life is kind of under attack because we don't understand how to control certain things. Our big picture is saying, we're going to help lock hands, join hands with other people trying to do good work around it and really get it to roll out to a bigger group where it's easier to understand, easier to follow, easier to get access to, and help more families.
Yeah. And if there was like a big ask that you just had to put out into the universe to bring this vision to life, what would that be?
I think if I had to ask, it's saying our material through blood, sweat, and tears, testing on our own family it's really good. It's really good because we built it to say we want better for our family and now have been able to share it. So I think we're looking for channels of more megaphones and also bringing our curriculum online because it's nice to be able to speak like at events that I've met you at, but I know that I have to, like you so successfully did, I have to embrace the online world so that we can organize, make the content more available and get it out to more people.
Yeah, I think this work is really important and matters. And even for non-entrepreneurial families, I know that obviously you focus on the type of community that you want to amplify as your dream customers, but I can see this shifting a whole conversation in education globally around the world, whether people are working in 9-to-5s or not. Just I think the work that you're sharing really, really matters.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I love to see the transformations you're making. You know, you have one big success and you didn't really just sit back and pat yourself on the shoulder and you said, well, what do I want to do next? And it looks like you're really doing it intentionally and, you know, with true meaning. So I just wanted to give you a virtual high five on that.
Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate that. And is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd just love to share as last parting thoughts?
Yes. Again, not to give too much credit to our 4-year-old right now, but we were both laughing that she's been teaching us lessons. And last week she got in trouble for something. And my wife and I had gotten excited, like, you could have hurt your brother that. My wife stayed calm. And I apologized to Maggie and said, Mags, I'm sorry. I got a little, worked up. I thought you hurt your brother. I should have stayed calm. And she said, Daddy, it's okay. We're all still learning. And my wife and I looked at each other. And honestly, that's been the theme in our house for the last couple of weeks. That if we could just look at our spouse and our kids and take that a thing instead of, you should know better. You should have known this. You should have figured out this is what I needed from you, or whatever it is. That's with spouse and kids. And we just take that thing of shrugging our shoulder and say, hey, we're all still learning. It just gives a much more gentle approach towards growth. And it's been really good for us. So that's kind of our newest thing on the plate right now. So take it or leave it. But it was the wisdom of a 4-year-old that our whole family has been saying to each other. And it's really created a little more patience and kindness for sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Maggie.
I'll tell you said so.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. This was just a very enlightening conversation, giving me some more food for thought on ways that I can implement just this very inspiring way of approaching education and also depth and family connection, and just doing the math of how many summers do you have left with your kids under the same roof, I think is a really positive inquiry to okay.
Yeah, it's a positive motivation.
Yeah. Well, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
I will. Thanks, Jada. Have a great day. Good talking to you.
Thank you so much for your heart and attention in listening to Lead with Love. If this message, leading with love in life and business, and remembering the humans and beating hearts behind the numbers and all of that good stuff, I would love for you to take the time to leave an honest review. It would mean the world to me, and it also helps more people find out about the goodness and helping spreading more love in the world, which we really, really need. So I would really appreciate that, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.